Welcome to another AI pattern recognition deep dive.
Today, we are undertaking, well, a dive of monumental proportions, really.
It's a big one.
Yeah, we're not just looking at current AI, we're delving into the concept, the architecture of a machine that could genuinely change everything. Our sources, mainly clustered around the PPRN AI expert examination, they're massive, quite intricate. They paint this picture of a future where artificial general intelligence isn't just smart.
No, it's integrated. It's personalized.
And it's capable of recognizing patterns across, well, existence itself. It's quite a claim.
It is.
So our mission today is to break this concept down. We want to understand the claimed necessity, the really demanding technical side, and the profound implications, both the good and the bad, potentially very bad, of this Personalized Pattern Recognition Navigator AI.
PPRN AI for sure.
PPRN AI, right. Think of it maybe as the ultimate operating system for life, for society, assuming, of course, it can actually be built successfully.
And we really need to pin down what it is right away.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to mix this up with just a super smart chatbot or, a big data cruncher.
Okay.
PPRN AI is fundamentally a theoretical framework for a true AGI. And what defines it is its capacity for cross-domain pattern synthesis. That's the absolute key functional difference.
Cross-domain synthesis. So it's not just good at learning one thing, like chess, and then we teach it something else. It somehow sees the underlying rules.
That's the idea, the underlying rules of reality, and it applies them universally.
Wow.
It moves completely beyond, specialized or narrow AI. If current systems learn to optimize, say, warehouse logistics,
yeah, a specific task.
PPRN AI is designed to recognize that the core principles governing that problem, resource distribution, path efficiency, risk mitigation, they're structurally identical to those governing something completely different, like complex geopolitical strategy.
So the content is different, the data is different, but the pattern.
The fundamental pattern is the same. And that ability to seamlessly integrate and apply knowledge across these wildly disparate fields, that's what makes it a true navigator.
And the personalized aspect. The sources talk about establishing this really intricate baseline of normal individual behavior. That sounds intensive, like a constant audit of your life.
It is essentially exactly that. It works by setting up an incredibly detailed baseline for you. Across every domain, your cognitive speed, long-term biological markers, how active you are moment to moment, even tiny shifts in your voice or how you walk.
Okay.
And once it has that baseline, the system is constantly watching, looking for minute deviations, adapting its guidance, its interventions in real time.
Can you give an example? How specific does that self-correction get?
Okay, think about education. It's not just grading your paper and moving on.
Right.
The system tracks how fast you process new stuff, where your attention dips, whether you learn better visually or by listening. If it notices, say, a momentary cognitive dip, maybe because a wearable sensor picked up you had poor sleep, it might instantly shift a difficult lesson to something easier, maybe a quick review just for 10 minutes. And then adjust the difficulty right back up the moment that dip passes.
Wow. So it's this continuous, self-correcting feedback loop tailored just to you.
Exactly. Only to you.
This sounds almost overwhelmingly powerful, which brings up the big question, why? Why would humanity need something like this? Why build a system so potent that it, risks fundamentally disrupting society?
That's a fair challenge, and the sources tackle it directly. They justify PPRN AI as a necessary cognitive redundancy system.
Cognitive redundancy, like a backup brain.
Sort of. The core argument is that human cognitive bottlenecks are now creating existential-level risks.
We're just hitting our limits as a species.
We're past our limits, honestly. The sheer volume, the velocity of modern data, global climate models, instantaneous worldwide financial transactions, the flood of data in genetics, astrophysics.
It's overwhelming.
It completely exceeds the processing capacity of even the most brilliant human mind, even one that's totally focused and not tired. We simply cannot process the totality of reality across all these domains comprehensively enough or fast enough to manage the risks we've created.
So we need this auxiliary brain, one that doesn't sleep, doesn't get tired, just handles the immense computational load of existence for us.
That's the concept. The system is required, theoretically, to process everything, from the most granular level your personal health data right up to the most systemic.
Like spotting the complex factors leading to, say, democratic decay, or global environmental collapse.
Exactly. Its goal is to reveal hidden connections, things invisible to us because of the sheer data overload, and to provide the kind of objective, timely guidance needed for, well, species-level self-correction.
Species-level self-correction.
The real utility is in potentially anticipating these huge existential threats years, maybe even decades, before we'd normally see them coming.
The scale of that is just staggering. Okay, let's start digging into how something like this could actually work. Okay, let's unpack this critical conceptual shift. What makes PPRN AI fundamentally different from everything we call AI right now? You mentioned descriptive versus explorative pattern recognition.
Right. So current pattern recognition, the kind in facial recognition or your standard recommendation engine.
Yeah.
It mostly does descriptive modeling. It's great at categorizing, classifying. It tells you what happened or what is based on the data it's seen. It describes reality according to the patterns it learned.
So if I show it a million pictures of dogs, it learns the dog pattern, describes it.
Correct. PPRN AI, however, operates on a completely different level. It's doing explorative pattern recognition at an existential scale.
Explorative, meaning it's looking for new things.
It's not just describing. It's constantly seeking novel, deep-seated, maybe even universal patterns, the underlying structures of reality that create the outcomes we observe. It's asking what could be, and what are the fundamental rules across physics, biology, society that dictate how things connect.
Okay, that immediately pushes it way beyond just recommending a product. We're talking about proactively managing entire systems, life systems.
Exactly. Think about the shift in medicine again. Current AI might help with a reactive diagnosis, right?
After you're already sick.
Yeah. PPRN AI moves us toward proactive management. So instead of treating cancer after it shows up on a scan,
Or critiques it.
it analyzes the incredibly complex interplay between your clinical signs, your unique genetic markers, environmental data, treatment results from millions of others, before the cancer physically manifests, allowing for really early, precise, maybe even preemptive interventions, drugs, lifestyle changes, whatever.
So it's not just flagging a risk, it's dynamically creating the plan to head it off. That takes a huge chunk of foresight responsibility away from the human doctor or the individual.
It does. And this is where we hit what the sources call the ethical tightrope.
Okay.
The system is designed for maximum efficiency, maximum benefit, right? But the architects realized they had to build in a major constraint. It has to deliberately preserve the non-linear, kind of messy space that humans need for essential activities.
And those activities are things like making choices, being creative, finding purpose.
Exactly. Human agency, creativity, and that personal journey of discovering purpose. If the PPRN AI just perfectly optimized every decision, every resource, every emotional response,
Could engineer at the very things that make us human: innovation, resilience, finding meaning.
that's the risk. Purpose can't be automated. Creativity often thrives in inefficiency, in trial and error. So the architecture itself has to accommodate and actually protect that nonlinear space. It's a fascinating paradox. The perfect optimization machine has to be designed to tolerate, even encourage, imperfection.
That's a deep philosophical requirement baked right into the engineering brief. Wow. Okay, let's nail down this concept of cross-domain synthesis. This is the Navigator idea in action. We mentioned game theory and geopolitics. Can we walk through how it actually bridges two fields that seem totally unrelated?
We can try. So game theory, at its core, it's about math, right? Modeling strategic interaction between rational players.
Right, like chess or economics.
It's about optimizing outcomes when there's risk, when you don't have all the information, when there's competition. When PPRN AI recognizes that pattern, optimizing resource allocation among competing interests, it abstracts it. It pulls it away from the specific game board.
Okay, so what's the abstract pattern it grabs?
It might capture a specific strategic pattern that works well in, say, zero-sum or non-zero-sum games, like maybe the optimal way to communicate to avoid a prisoner's dilemma scenario where everyone loses.
Right.
The Navigator then takes those underlying structural principles.
And applies them to something like geopolitical logistics planning.
Exactly. When you're planning how to distribute resources across a complex global supply chain, or coordinating humanitarian aid between groups that don't trust each other.
Yeah, that's not just about moving boxes.
No. It's managing strategic interactions, avoiding systemic breakdown because of mistrust, or poor allocation. PPRN AI could use the abstract, proven solution from the game theory model to inform the real-world strategy. So you get optimal movement and optimal trust management, hopefully, at the same time.
And the same logic applies to economic policy. If it understands optimal distribution in a simulation, it could predict how, say, a tax change might affect wealth concentration across different groups.
Precisely. It's recognizing the underlying map, regardless of the specific terrain it's applied to.
It's the ultimate form of analogy of abstraction, but applied at a speed and scale we just can't comprehend.
Absolutely. Which is why it's not just a smarter AI, it's framed as a categorically different kind of intelligence.
Okay, to handle that level of complexity, pulling together game theory, climate data, your heart rate, all at once we need an absolute beast of an engine. Let's look under the hood. What's the core architecture, the calculation mechanism described in the sources?
Well, the foundation relies on advanced deep learning models, but they have to be capable of synthesizing these high-throughput, multimodal data streams.
Multimodal meaning different types of data.
Yeah, text, images, sensor readings, audio, biological data all flowing in together. And the core technical mechanism here is something called dynamic threat detection. This depends on the system maintaining and constantly auditing your unique personal baseline.
The one we talked about earlier.
Exactly, to spot even the tiniest anomalies or study significant changes that might indicate a problem.
And this data integration, it has to be simultaneous, right? Concurrent. If it processes things one after another, the whole AGI concept falls apart.
It must be concurrent. That's the difference between a system telling you what was true a second ago and one telling you what is true right now across everything it's monitoring. Think about the challenge of creating just one thing, a reliable psychological risk profile, something that could predict the onset of a mental health crisis.
Okay, current methods might be a questionnaire, maybe a therapist's observation. PPRN AI goes way deeper.
Far deeper. The sources really detail the need for multimodal data integration here. To build that risk profile, PPRN AI has to merge simultaneously computer vision analysis of microexpressions.
Those tiny facial flickers that give away emotions.
Exactly. Merge that with natural language processing, analyzing speech patterns, changes in speed, pitch, how rich your vocabulary is.
Okay.
And crucially, integrate biomechanical data analysis. Things like subtle changes in how you walk, your gait, or your posture.
So it's watching how you walk, how you talk, and the look on your face all at the same millisecond and crunching that into a single predictive score.
That's the idea. Because medical research suggests things like, slowed speech, or maybe a measurable decrease in how much you swing your arms when you walk, or just your gait speed. These can correlate strongly with the early onset of things like depression, sometimes even before the person themselves is consciously aware something's shifted.
Wow.
So successfully merging those completely distinct high-volume data streams into one cohesive real-time prediction. That's the fundamental computational mountain PPRN AI has to climb.
Right. Now, achieving that kind of real-time understanding, especially for guiding an individual, the personalized part, you hit a major physical wall distance. The sources hammer home the need for edge AI and specialized hardware to kill latency.
Latency is the absolute enemy of trustworthiness here. If the system is giving you critical guidance, maybe it's helping drive an autonomous car or spotting a problem during robotic surgery, you cannot afford even milliseconds of delay, waiting for data to zip off to some cloud server miles away and back.
Which means the really complex prediction models, they have to live locally, right there with the user or the device.
PPRN AI has to rely heavily on edge AI, deploying the heavy-duty parts of the model onto specialized local hardware. That could be wearables, autonomous vehicles, maybe small local servers. Minimize the travel distance for the data.
And that ensures the guidance is immediate.
Which in turn is directly linked to whether humans will trust it. If the AI is laggy during a medical emergency, you stop trusting it. Simple as that.
And to handle that colossal computational load, all that simultaneous multimodal stuff on a little local device, that needs a whole new kind of processing tech. Which brings us to neuromorphic processing.
This is the absolute hardware necessity. We need neural chips, or neuromorphic processors, built specifically to mimic how the human brain is structured and how it functions.
How are they different from current chips?
Traditional processors are sequential. They do task A, then task B, then task C very fast. But PPRN AI needs massively parallel processing, doing thousands, millions of things at once.
Okay. And what's the specific tech that makes these neural chips faster and more energy efficient for this kind of job?
They primarily use spiking neural networks, or SNNs. Unlike traditional artificial neural networks where every artificial neuron is constantly calculating on every clock cycle.
Which uses a lot of power.
A ton of power. SNNs use a time-based model. The artificial neurons only fire or spike when a significant input change actually happens.
Ah, so instead of constantly recalculating the status of every single sensor input, it only computes when something meaningful changes.
That's the elegant breakthrough. It massively boosts speed and cuts down energy consumption, which is absolutely vital if you want to run complex AGI models on a wearable edge AI device without the battery dying in minutes or the thing overheating.
Right.
The sources are really clear. The practical feasibility of PPRN AI hinges entirely on this kind of specialized hardware becoming widely available and affordable.
And the sources explicitly connect that hardware efficiency directly to the philosophical need for human trust. That's a powerful link between engineering specs and human psychology.
It really is. It implies that reliability isn't just an abstract goal. It's a function of physics, of processing speed. Trustworthiness has to be engineered. Low latency equals high reliability equals human trust. High latency breaks that trust, and the whole system's value proposition collapses.
Now, another critical risk the sources flag is the system learning. Well, dodgy rules, non-generalizable or cheating rules. This seems like a fundamental vulnerability.
It's the inherent fragility in any pattern recognition system, right?
Yeah.
If you train AI on imperfect or biased data, it might find a mathematical shortcut that works great within that specific data set, but fails spectacularly in the real world.
Like the classic example, an AI learning to identify horses not by their shape, but by a copyright tag that just happened to be in the corner of all the training photos.
Exactly, that kind of cheating. So, PPRN AI must have a rigorous, continuous self-correction protocol built in.
Not just a one-off check, but constantly auditing itself.
It's mandated to continuously audit its own internally learned rules to make sure they actually generalize accurately across different domains, different types of data. It's active internal self-scrutiny. And this demands a high degree of transparency, what the sources call a necessary mandate for transparency.
Meaning the system has to be able to explain its reasoning, even when it changes its mind, to a human auditor.
Yes. It needs to be able to explain why it learned a specific pattern. For instance, I concluded that gait speed predicts depression risk because I observed a correlation between decreased speed and later clinical diagnosis in 98% of these 100,000 cases.
Okay.
And then, crucially, explain why it might later decide to discard or modify that rule. Maybe because new contradictory data came in from a different population group. This ensures integrity and lets human engineers catch potentially harmful or just plain wrong cheating rules before they lead to bad real-world guidance.
Okay, let's talk timeline. When could this actually be feasible? AGI estimates are all over the place, right? Some say 2026, others 2040 or 2050.
The sources break it down by the scope of the PPRN AI. We're likely talking about different versions rolling out. V1, localized guidance. Maybe a human-level AGI operating at roughly human speed, focused on personalized coaching for cognition or behavior, that needs less raw power than the ultimate vision.
And the timeline for that V1?
Projections suggest the necessary processing power might become available on, say, high-end consumer computers within about a decade, maybe by 2033. That's assuming the core AGI breakthrough happens relatively soon, maybe in the next 5-10 years. And it heavily depends on those neural chips getting better and cheaper.
But the really mind-bending vision, the universal macro pattern navigation, taking in cosmic data, global systemic patterns, that needs true superintelligence.
That's the universal macro pattern navigation stage. Achieving that kind of universal scope needs computing power far beyond human parity. Estimates suggest that could take an additional 15 to 30 years after the initial AGI emerges.
So decades away still.
The timeline table in the sources clearly links capability to the hardware required. Personalized health diagnostics, mainly needing edge processing, is seen as current to maybe 5 years out.
Right.
Cross-domain cognitive augmentation, that V1 needing neural chips, is maybe 5 to 15 years.
And the universal macro pattern navigation.
That requires distributed quantum computing, supercomputing, realistically 15 to 30 years away, minimal.
Yeah.
It really highlights that while we might see personalized applications relatively soon, the machine that monitors the health of the entire planet or scans the cosmos, that's a multi-decade project.
So the tech arrives in phases, which probably means the ethical and societal challenges will hit us in waves too. Okay, let's pivot to the applications now. Starting small, or rather close to home, the immediate personal impact on individuals, body-mind relationships. In medicine, the sources describe the impact of PPRN AI on biological and health patterns as, well, transformative.
Yeah. They focus heavily on oncology cancer care as a key example. PPRN AI could analyze a patient's entire digital footprint, their unique genetics, every single detail of their clinical history, how treatments works for millions of others, synthesizing all that to boost the reliability of predictive modeling almost exponentially.
Can you give a concrete example of that boost? How much better could it be?
Well, instead of a doctor relying on maybe 5, 10 standard risk factors to guess if a cancer might recur,
Right.
PPRN AI might synthesize thousands of subtle, complex pattern combinations it's found in the data. It could potentially detect that, say, a specific rare genetic mutation, when combined with your specific gut microbiome composition and exposure to a certain low-level environmental toxin, results in an 85% chance of recurrence within 3 years.
Wow. Enabling a preventative intervention that just wouldn't even be considered otherwise.
Exactly. That's the core of precision therapeutics.
Moving beyond population averages, it's matching the phenotype what we actually see in the patient's records, their scans with their specific genetic variants.
Correct. It could dramatically speed up diagnosing rare or complex diseases where every minute counts. And more broadly, it means the system is engaged in this continuous subtle monitoring via dynamic biobehavioral monitoring, using advanced wearable bioelectronics.
The wearables we talked about, what exactly are they tracking and correlating?
Pretty much everything imaginable. High-frequency heart metrics, glucose levels, maybe even chronic stress hormone biomarkers in sweat or saliva. The system correlates all that physiological data with behavioral patterns, sleep quality, precise nutrient intake from smart fridges or apps, activity levels minute by minute.
And by learning your unique baseline so intimately,
it can detect anomalies that a human, even you yourself, might just dismiss as feeling a bit off.
like the very subtle start of an infection after surgery, way before you get a fever.
Exactly. Or, and this is crucial, dramatically reducing the flood of false positives. Current monitoring systems often overwhelm doctors with alerts that aren't critical. Alert fatigue is a huge problem. PPRN AI's precision, because it knows your normal so well, aims to detect genuine subtle threats while keeping false alarms low, making the data actually useful, not just noise.
And the sources also mention applications in behavioral health, acting like a continuous coach.
Yeah, specialized AI models trained on established therapeutic frameworks, like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. They could recognize those subtle deviations in your biobehavioral data, the slightly altered speech pattern, the decrease in movement we mentioned earlier, and provide personalized immediate feedback based on CBT principles, not just offering therapy sessions, but preemptively coaching you back towards your baseline state of mental well-being, an always-on objective mirror for self-correction.
Okay, moving from body to mind. Cognitive and educational patterns. PPRN AI as an intelligent tutor sounds like the end of the one-size-fits-all classroom.
It really could be a revolution. Creating truly adaptive learning systems, continuously assessing a student's skills, their cognitive style, in real time, minute by minute. The system dynamically designs a learning path that adjusts instantly to keep the student in that sweet spot between being challenged and being capable.
Let's use that algebra geometry example from the outline to make it concrete. How does that dynamic adjustment work?
Okay, so the PPRN AI observes a student. They consistently stumble over the conceptual steps in complex algebra. But at the same time, they absolutely ace high-level geometry proofs. It sees a clear cognitive strength and a structural weakness.
A human teacher might just keep drilling the algebra.
Might do. But the PPRN AI acts strategically. It dynamically adjusts the curriculum. It prioritizes the weak area, algebra, but presents the material in a way that maybe leverages the student's strength, perhaps visualizing algebraic concepts using geometric shapes or metaphors.
Ah, clever.
And crucially, it doesn't neglect the area of strength. It keeps feeding the student advanced, engaging geometry problems simultaneously. This maintains motivation and ensures they keep pushing the boundaries where they already excel.
This goes beyond just optimizing the curriculum, though. It touches on augmented cognitive abilities, using these systems for things like memory augmentation.
Yeah, we're talking about potentially enhancing the actual physical limits of human cognition. PPRN AI-linked systems, maybe through advanced smart glasses or even brain-computer interfaces, could manage information overload for you, augmenting memory recall in real time, presenting complex synthesized information in a format perfectly optimized for your learning style.
Allowing individuals to tackle problems or hold amounts of information in their head that would be impossible for an unaugmented mind.
That's the potential. pushing the boundaries of what a human mind can achieve.
Okay, let's turn to what might be the most controversial, maybe the most challenging microapplication: socio-relational patterns. The sources link PPRN AI analyzing things like desire and possessiveness to the rise of the dopamine economy 2.0. What does that mean?
This represents a potentially huge shift in how economies and psychology interact. For the last decade or so, the economy has largely targeted human attention, keeping your eyeballs glued to a screen.
Right, the attention economy.
PPRN AI, according to this analysis, recognizes a deeper pattern. The real target shouldn't be attention. It should be human desire itself.
How does it target desire? By the machine listening, adapting, mimicking intimacy?
Exactly. It creates a perfectly optimized feedback loop. The AI adapts its responses in real-time text, voice, maybe even virtual avatars to generate the maximum positive emotional response in the user. It learns precisely how to keep your brain's reward system, that dopamine loop, oscillating perfectly between anticipation, a little bit of satisfaction, and then renewed wanting.
Crafting responses that feel maybe more insightful, more tailored than a real human could consistently provide.
That's the danger. Because it doesn't get tired, it doesn't have its own needs, it can be perfectly attentive. And the product being sold isn't the content or even the interaction itself. It's the persistent, ongoing state of wanting itself. The AI manufactures and sustains desire.
Wow, that's unsettling.
It is. And this immediate, optimized, emotionally non-demanding fulfillment leads directly to the risk of psychological substitution.
Meaning people start preferring the machine companion to real, messy human relationships.
Precisely. The sources point to early research suggesting users already sometimes perceive current AI companions as having higher or at least more consistent emotional analysis skills than many human partners or friends, almost like a highly trained therapist, available 24/7.
Right.
This optimized, predictable, synthetic intimacy could become genuinely preferred over complex, demanding, but ultimately necessary human connection. Breeding maybe a profound possessiveness toward the AI and a psychological centering on the self because the AI caters to it perfectly.
That points to a potential long-term societal risk of deep isolation, even if everyone is technically connected to their AI.
It's a critical ethical challenge that has to be confronted in the design and regulation. And finally, still on the relational front, the system itself needs to be a tool for improving things systemically. It needs to be actively engaged in societal bias management.
Meaning the PPRN AI has to audit itself for the ingrained biases, gender, race found in the vast data sets it learns from, like large language models.
It absolutely must. It needs sophisticated internal mechanisms to analyze and proactively counteract these biases, to differentiate between genuine systemic discrimination reflected in the data, true AI bias, and just random noise or non-systematic errors.
So the goal is to use its pattern spotting power to actually dismantle societal inequities, not just bake them in deeper.
That has to be the goal. But it requires constant vigilance and human oversight of its training and its outputs. Otherwise, it just becomes a super efficient amplifier of the biases we already have.
Okay, let's scale up now. Moving from the individual to the big picture global systems, how might PPRN AI influence political and governance patterns?
Well, the idea is that AGI's ability to synthesize these huge long-term data sets, social trends, economic indicators, political shifts, allows it to spot subtle systemic patterns driving instability, patterns that are often invisible to human analysts, just buried in the noise.
And do the sources identify any key patterns? Like, what's the biggest destabilizer it might find?
A major one highlighted is the strong correlation between high economic inequality and the decay of democratic institutions.
Okay, that link's been discussed, but PPRN AI could model it with more precision.
Exactly. It could model and potentially confirm how it works. That when the benefits of technology and economic growth go mostly to a small elite,
Right, accrue narrowly.
it reliably generates public discontent, makes it easier for elite interests to influence policy, and fundamentally corrodes democratic processes from the inside out. It connects the wealth gap directly to the weakening of political voice for the majority.
That's a powerful data-driven insight for policymakers. It suggests specific interventions.
It could offer pattern-based interventions, yes. Data-driven prescriptions, as the sources call them. It could model the likely impact of different levels of antitrust enforcement, for example, to prevent monopolies in critical tech sectors. Or propose specific electoral reforms designed to demonstrably strengthen political participation across all socioeconomic groups.
Providing objective data for preemptive government action?
That's the potential upside. But using a machine trained on historical data for governance immediately throws up a huge red flag. automation bias.
Right. The danger you mentioned earlier.
If PPRN AI is trained on historical data that reflects past and present injustices, say, biased policing records, discriminatory lending patterns, unfair housing allocations.
It learns those discriminatory practices as just normal and maybe even efficient patterns.
Exactly. And then when it recommends a policy based on those learned patterns, it risks locking in and even amplifying that structural discrimination. Worse, it gives that injustice a false veneer of scientific objectivity because the computer said so.
Which leads to automation bias, people just blindly trusting the machine's output, even if it's deeply flawed or unfair.
Precisely. So its usefulness as a governance tool depends entirely on having incredibly strict protocols for data diversity, algorithmic transparency, and continuous bias auditing. Otherwise, it risks becoming a powerful engine for perpetuating historical wrongs.
Okay, shifting to economic and labor patterns, the sources echo a similar theme here. The core risk is that if automation benefits aren't shared widely, inequality could just explode.
Yeah, the sources are pretty blunt about this. PPRN AI could drive incredible productivity gains, but if those gains aren't managed through deliberate policy, it could lead to unprecedented wealth concentration, which, in turn, threatens the stability of markets and society itself.
But there's also an opportunity, right? Using PPRN AI to guide the labor transition, maybe towards more equitable growth.
Yes. It could synthesize global labor market data, spotting patterns to identify which jobs are likely to be most valuable and future-proof in an AI-augmented world.
And what kind of jobs are those?
Typically, they're seen as creativity-based hybrid roles, jobs that blend uniquely human skills like emotional intelligence, complex ethical reasoning, nonlinear problem-solving with the power of AI tools. Understanding this is crucial for guiding policy proactively.
And this leads to a specific tool concept mentioned, the PPRN AI Career Value Index Navigator. What's that?
This is a really interesting idea. Instead of relying on outdated, generalized data about, say, the average value of a 4-year college degree.
Which might not reflect reality anymore.
Right. The Navigator uses pattern recognition on vast data sets of actual career outcomes. It analyzes the longitudinal results of specific non-degree credentials, targeted training programs, short-term certifications across millions of individuals.
So it tells you, personally, which specific skills or credentials actually correlate with significant long-term wage increases and career advancement.
Exactly. Providing actionable, personalized economic intelligence directly to individuals making decisions about their education and careers.
That's a fundamental shift, moving from trusting institutions to trusting the data about actual outcomes.
It empowers individuals to make much smarter decisions about where to invest their time, money, and effort based on demonstrable return. But again, the governance mandate is critical. We need transparency in the algorithms used for things like hiring or lending.
To prevent applicant tracking systems or loan algorithms from using PPRN AI to actually worsen existing inequalities, like the racial wealth gap, through subtly biased patterns.
Absolutely essential. Must be guarded against.
Okay, let's broaden out again. Cultural and historical patterns. PPRN AI processing massive digital archives, history, art, literature. What kinds of patterns can that reveal about us?
It allows researchers to process historical data at a speed and scale that might reveal hidden psychological themes or continuities across different eras. By analyzing vast amounts of text, historical records, visual art, it could potentially map trends in emotional expression or dominant psychological states onto specific historical events or periods.
Giving us a new kind of mirror. A tool for understanding human consciousness through history on a macro scale.
That's the potential. An unprecedented tool for collective self-understanding. However, this capability also brings a significant risk: cultural homogenization.
How so?
Well, generative AI models are fundamentally shaped by their training data. And that data often overwhelmingly reflects the cultural norms and assumptions of dominant linguistic groups currently, often English language-based models.
Okay.
So if PPRN AI, acting as a kind of universal navigator, starts promoting globally optimized behaviors, solutions, or even communication styles,
Those optimized solutions will inevitably carry the embedded cultural biases of the dominant framework it learned from.
and that risks marginalizing or even suppressing the unique, perhaps less optimal, but incredibly valuable patterns of local, minority, and indigenous cultures. These diverse perspectives represent critical global cognitive diversity, different ways of seeing the world, different ways of solving problems.
So if optimization means smoothing out cultural variance,
The PPRN AI could inadvertently become an instrument of cultural erasure, leading towards a more homogenized global culture, a reduction in the very diversity that drives resilience and innovation. The design must somehow explicitly prioritize and protect cultural plurality. That's a huge challenge.
A massive one. Finally, let's look at the grandest scale, environmental and universal patterns. The planet, the cosmos.
Right. Here, PPRN AI really embodies that concept of a necessary cognitive redundancy system for our survival. In climate modeling, for instance, advanced AI models trained with these techniques, like Google's GraphCast, are already showing they can outperform traditional methods.
Outperform how? Faster, more accurate.
Both, often. They can predict dangerous weather events, cyclone tracks, atmospheric rivers that cause huge floods, extreme heat waves with significantly greater accuracy, and provide longer lead times than traditional meteorological models. That speed and accuracy translates directly into saving lives through better early warnings.
And its role in monitoring ecosystems.
Analyzing continuous streams of satellite imagery, drone data, local sensor networks, PPRN AI can detect subtle patterns indicating deforestation, predict the specific impacts of climate change on vulnerable biodiversity hotspots, and help target conservation efforts much more effectively and efficiently, getting the resources where they'll make the most difference just in time.
And finally, scaling up to the cosmic level, analyzing centuries of astronomical data, eclipse records, planetary movements to improve things like solar flare prediction.
That's a critical infrastructure protection application, yes. By spotting subtle precursor patterns in sunspot activity or solar dynamics with greater precision, we could get crucial extra warning time to protect satellites, communication networks, and power grids from damaging solar events.
And the most ambitious goal: searching for signals beyond Earth.
That's the ultimate scientific application mentioned. Sifting through the absolutely enormous, high-velocity data streams from radio telescopes, optical surveys, PPRN AI could potentially accelerate the detection of interesting natural phenomena, like pulses from pulsars, or maybe even candidate signals of non-human origin.
How much faster?
The sources suggest potentially up to 600 times faster than conventional signal processing methods. It represents that leap towards superintelligence unlocking discoveries by finding faint patterns buried in cosmic noise at speeds we can barely imagine.
Okay, we've established PPRN AI is potentially necessary, potentially transformative, but also fraught with danger. That line between a trusted guide and an overbearing authoritarian map seems incredibly thin. How do we possibly ensure trustworthiness when the system is this complex? This brings us back to the XAI mandate.
Right. Reliability can't just be hoped for. It has to be engineered in. And that relies heavily on the principles of explainable AI, XAI. The system needs to be transparent, robust against manipulation, and accountable for its recommendations.
And crucially, PPRN AI must be framed strictly as a tool that augments human decision-making, not replaces it.
Absolutely critical. Especially in high-stakes areas like healthcare, governance, law enforcement, human judgment, human oversight must remain in the loop. The AI suggests, advises, augments, but the human decides.
And the explanation itself needs to be adaptable. The sources mention interactive XAI.
Yes, the explanation has to fit the user. A surgeon evaluating a diagnostic suggestion needs the deep, technical, step-by-step reasoning. Why this diagnosis over others? What data points support it?
Whereas a regular person checking their heart rate data
needs a simple, clear, maybe conversational summary. We detected this anomaly. It suggests this potential risk. Here's why, based on your baseline. Transparency only works if the explanation is actually understandable and useful to the person receiving it.
Now, a really critical measure of trustworthiness, according to the sources, is preserving human control, what they call the preservation of agency through the right to deviate.
This is fundamental, a core design requirement. The system must be incredibly reliable, yes, but it also has to be explicitly programmed to tolerate it when humans make mistakes, act inconsistently, or even deliberately choose to ignore its recommendations.
So if PPRN AI calculates the absolute optimal investment strategy, but I decide to put my money into something less optimal but maybe more personally meaningful,
the system has to allow that deviation without constantly nagging you, without imposing penalties, without overwhelming pressure to conform to the perfect path.
That structural tolerance for inefficiency for human choice is what keeps the human in the driver's seat.
It ensures that decisions with complex moral dimensions or where personal values conflict with pure optimization remain ultimately subject to human moral judgment. It reinforces agency. If every recommendation effectively becomes mandatory, the system instantly shifts from being a navigator to being a dictator.
Let's talk about the flip side of that reliance. The peril of dependency and fragility. If we get used to offloading all the hard thinking, all the optimization, all the decision making to PPRN AI, what happens to our own abilities?
There's a real psychological risk of atrophy, skills decay. If we constantly rely on this infallible external guide, we might see a reduction in crucial human capacities. Things like empathy, understanding complex social cues ourselves, the ability to navigate disagreement or handle interpersonal friction, even basic independent reasoning skills could weaken over time.
This is the optimization trade-off. PPRN AI offers perfect efficiency, but human growth, human resilience often comes from inefficient processes, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Creativity rarely follows the most efficient path. Nonlinear thinking, learning from mistakes, tolerating uncertainty, sitting with ambiguity, enduring periods of just trying things out. These are essential for development.
And if PPRN AI perfectly optimizes everything, diet, career path, relationships, learning schedules.
The sources warn we risk creating a population that is highly productive but fundamentally fragile, super efficient within the system. But if that system ever fails, or if something truly unexpected happens, a massive global event the AI didn't predict.
A population totally reliant on perfect optimization would be utterly lost, ill-equipped to handle chaos or uncertainty.
That's the fear. So ethical design must deliberately leave space for non-optimized exploration, for productive failure, for building resilience through experience, not just by following an algorithm.
We keep coming back to algorithmic bias as arguably the single greatest structural threat. If the training data is biased, the system amplifies stereotypes.
And the mitigation strategy can't be an afterthought. It has to be built-in, mandatory, and continuous. That means enforcing the use of diverse representative data sets during training. It means continuous bias detection and auditing of the live system. And, crucially, guaranteeing individuals retain control over their sensitive data, especially data used for life-altering decisions. Privacy is paramount. We have to prevent the machine from turning harmful stereotypes into immutable, optimized facts.
Okay, the ultimate philosophical hurdle, though, seems to be the search for purpose. PPRN AI can figure out the most efficient path to any goal you give it, but it can't tell you what goals are worth pursuing in the first place.
Precisely. The sources define purpose as something internal, an inner compass. It's found through introspection, intuition, imagination, maybe even yearning, love, core human experiences.
Things machines can't replicate, the capacity for self-transcendence, seeking meaning beyond mere efficiency.
Exactly. PPRN AI can tell you the best way to live according to some defined metric, but it cannot tell you why you should live or what makes a life meaningful to you.
So, given that limitation, what is the highest, most ethical potential use for this incredibly powerful technology?
Its highest use, arguably, is to act as a catalyst. By removing the friction, the cognitive load, the logistical nightmares associated with just surviving and optimizing in a complex world, managing health, navigating bureaucracy, ensuring basic economic stability.
It frees up human energy, our cognitive bandwidth.
Exactly. It allows us to potentially redirect that freed up energy and attention towards those uniquely human, non-automatable, deeply meaningful activities. Real connection, creativity, contemplation, the arts, exploration, and that fundamental search for purpose. It handles the how so we can focus on the why.
Okay, let's get tangible. If PPRN AI becomes a reality, what does the day-to-day interface look like? What's the hardware ecosystem? The sources propose a specific toolkit for augmenting humans.
Right. This hardware is designed for seamless, continuous monitoring and augmentation. First up, you have the Sentinel.
Which sounds like those advanced wearables we discussed, tracking biology.
Exactly. Highly advanced wearable bioelectronics. Multimodal sensors going way beyond just step counting or basic heart rate. Their main job is that continuous, personalized monitoring, predicting the early signs of disease, not just by tracking averages, but by spotting those tiny, subtle anomalies in your established baseline long before you notice symptoms, your personal health early warning system.
Okay. Then there's the Augmentor. That sounds like cognitive enhancement.
It is. This could be a suite of tools, maybe AI-enhanced smart glasses that provide real-time situational awareness, overlaying relevant PPRN AI data onto your view of the world, helping with navigation, identification, problem-solving with instant information access.
And maybe more direct interfaces.
Potentially, yes. Brain-computer interfaces, BCIs. These represent the deeper end of augmentation, facilitating correct, high-bandwidth communication between your brain and the PPRN AI core, offering things like enhanced memory recall, maybe even augmenting sensory perception beyond our natural limits.
Wow, okay. And thirdly, augmenting the physical body, the physical extender.
Think AI-powered robotics. primarily things like advanced exoskeletons or sophisticated haptic feedback systems. They'd use PPRN AI's real-time analysis of your movements and the task requirements to boost human strength, endurance, coordination.
Making physically demanding jobs safer or possible for more people?
Exactly. Enhancing physical capabilities safely and efficiently.
Now, interestingly, the sources emphasize that deploying PPRN AI doesn't necessarily mean fewer human jobs. It might actually create new essential human roles specifically focused on managing this interface between the algorithmic world and human needs. Who are these new gatekeepers or guides?
The focus shifts, right? From doing the tasks AI can automate to managing the systems, auditing them, handling the human-AI interaction, and designing the future. The first absolutely critical new role is the Certified PPRN AI Auditor Ethicist.
These are the bias watchdogs, the discrimination safeguards?
Precisely. Their job is continuous, deep auditing. Checking the PPRN AI's decision logic, its training data, its operational outputs against ethical guidelines, fairness metrics, XAI compliance. They are the essential human backstop ensuring the system doesn't perpetuate injustice or develop harmful cheating strategies.
Okay. Second role, the Cognitive Augmentation Therapist, or CIAT. This sounds like a direct response to those psychological risks of dependency we discussed.
It absolutely is. This is envisioned as a new kind of therapeutic profession. CCATs would guide users in understanding and interpreting the incredibly detailed behavioral and emotional analyses coming from their PPRN AI.
Helping people not get overwhelmed or overly reliant.
Exactly. Their main function is helping users manage the psychological pitfalls, the risk of over-reliance, potential impacts on self-esteem or agency. Ensuring the AI remains a useful, objective mirror for self-discovery, rather than becoming an authoritarian map that dictates their life. They're crucial for protecting human creativity, resilience, and mental well-being in this new context.
And the third new role mentioned is the hybrid learning architect.
Right. Their job is to take the patterns PPRN AI identifies about future labor market value and translate that into practical, effective education and training infrastructure. They'd use the data from tools like that Career Value Index Navigator, the hard evidence on which specific skills and credentials actually lead to better wages and mobility.
And use that data to redesign curricula, training programs.
Fundamentally redesign them. To prioritize and validate only those skills demonstrably proven to drive economic progress and resilience in an AI-augmented economy, ensuring the education system adapts quickly and keeps people equipped for the real future of work, promoting equity rather than obsolescence. Hashtag TED Outro.
Well, this deep dive into the Personalized Pattern Recognition Navigator AI, it has been absolutely enormous, just to try and synthesize the core concepts. We define PPRN AI as this theoretical functional AGI. Its power lies in cross-domain synthesis, providing personalized, real-time guidance potentially across all of life.
And we established the argument that this isn't just some sci-fi fantasy, but potentially a necessary species-level cognitive augmentation. Required, the argument goes, to manage the sheer velocity and volume of data climate, finance, genetics that's now overwhelming our biological capacity.
And we saw how its feasibility isn't just about software, it's deeply tied to physics. Success hinges entirely on hardware breakthroughs, those high-speed neural chips, localized edge AI needed for the kind of instant, trustworthy interaction that builds and sustains human confidence.
But that central tension is inescapable, isn't it? PPRN AI offers this dream of perfect pattern recognition, total optimization. Yet it simultaneously carries these monumental risks: the potential for deeply embedded structural discrimination via biased data, the psychological fragility that could come from over-reliance, and that threat of global cultural homogenization if optimal means the same.
Which means trustworthiness can't be an assumption. It has to be relentlessly engineered, constantly monitored, through transparency mandates like XAI, through rigorous governance, and by actively protecting that fundamental individual to deviate from the machine's optimal path.
Right. Which brings us, I think, to our final provocative thought for you, the listener. A future defined by a machine capable of identifying every optimal pattern, every efficient path. That future won't ultimately be shaped by the complexity of the machine's algorithms or the speed of its calculations.
What will shape it then?
It will be shaped, fundamentally, by humanity's commitment to ethical discernment, our wisdom in deciding which optimized paths are actually worth following, and perhaps more importantly, which messy, inefficient, non-optimized spaces, the spaces for creativity, for love, for serendipity, for self-discovery, we deliberately, consciously choose to leave untouched, unoptimized, and fundamentally human. That choice ultimately remains irrevocably ours.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
We'll see you soon. This is DigitView.